everyone, it's Alice, and today we're doing a book haul. I guess this will be the last book haul of the year, and I have loads of exciting books to show you, all of which I'm very much looking forward to reading. And we should probably just get straight into it, and we're gonna start with a graphic novel. So you may know that one of my favorite graphic novels ever is Garlic and the Vampire. I love that book so much, and the author and illustrator of that has come out with a new book, so obviously I had to get it. It's The Firelight Apprentice by Bree Paulsen. To be honest, I kind of got this without looking that much into it because I just love this author so much, and I'm sure this is gonna be great. The story is set in like a fantasy world, I think in a magical city that is recovering from a war, and we're meeting this character who has magical abilities and the elder sister of that character. She like realizes that her younger sister needs to be sent away to be trained, to like train how to use her abilities, I guess. And she's a little apprehensive about it, and I think that the little sister ends up becoming a sort of apprentice to this traveling group of magicians or something. I'm sure this is going to be a treat to read, and the art looks lovely, just like in Garlic and the Vampire. I really like how this author illustrates characters and settings. I really enjoy that. So I'm really looking forward to this. I am a little bit torn though, because on one hand, I kind of just want to read it right away because I know I'm going to love it. But on the other hand, I kind of want to save it for a rainy day when I need it. But then sometimes when I do that, I end up saving books for ages. So I don't know, but I think this is going to be amazing. It looks very magical. Secondly, we have a sci-fi dystopia type of book, which I think maybe one of you recommended it to me. I can't remember where I got this from, but I'm pretty sure someone recommended this to me somewhere. It's The Blue Book of Nebo by Manon Steffan Ross. This follows a boy who was 6 when the end of the world came about, and electricity was shut off and normal 21st century life was over. And I think we meet him when he's 14 and he's living with his mother in this remote house. And I think the book is just about them and their relationship and them surviving, and how they're surviving not just the end of the world, but also the experience this kid has of being a teenager and like coming of age. This seems to me like one of those more quieter post-apocalyptic books where we're not in the middle of the action and it's more about the characters and sort of everyday life, which I do quite enjoy. So I'm excited to see what this is like. Moving on, we have a big category with a mix of fantasy, mystery, and horror, which I've just put together because a lot of these books have sort of overlapping genres, so it was easier to just put them together. First up here we have Curious Tides by Pascale Lacelle, and this is a book that comes up occasionally when I talk about like dark academia and dark academia-ish books, and that intrigued me because I love those kinds of books. This is YA, I think, which can go both ways for me sometimes, but the story sounds really intriguing. It's about this mage who is the only survivor of this tragedy, and I think that left a lot of her classmates dead. And after this event, she finds that she has these new powers and they're almost uncontrollable. And I think the story is about her trying to learn how to control it, but also trying to figure out what actually happened during that tragedy, and maybe like the school they went to, maybe they had something to do with it. And there's something about a secret cult-like society in here, all of which sounds really cool. I think there are some romance elements in here as well, which can also go both ways for me, but the story sounds like it has a lot of elements to it that I would really like, so I'm excited to give this a go. I also really like this cover, and there are these like pages in the middle where there's like white text on a black background. That's a really cool thing. I don't know if it's gonna add anything to the story, but it looks really cool. Then we have a book that I got from a friend actually, who read it and really liked it and thought I might like it too. It's The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz. And this is like a fantasy novel inspired by the history and folklore of South America. And the story is about these two girls, one of which who seeks refuge with her grandmother, who's like a dark sorceress, and the other is like sort of an outcast in her family. I can't remember why, but she's trying to be perfect to sort of fit in, and she feels like magic is calling to her, which I guess isn't a great thing in her family. What happens with all of this, I have no idea, but I'm excited to read this, especially because my friend told me that she really liked the fantasy world in here, and like there's some mythology inspired stuff which she knows that I like, which is probably why she thought I would like this. So I'm excited to give this a go. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone talk about this book, so it'll be interesting. It's also beautiful. I love this cover. It's a little different, but I really like it. Next, because I am me, we have A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. And those of you who are on this channel a lot will know that I have a growing obsession with this author. She can do no wrong. I've liked everything that I've read by her, and every single one of her books just sounds really interesting, and I can't stop getting them, and I just couldn't resist this one. Although, to be fair, I did not try to resist this very hard. I think this is a retelling of a Brothers Grimm story. I think it's called Goose Girl, which I feel like I've read, but I can't remember anything about it. But this is like a fantasy horror book, and it tells the story of this girl who grows up with her mother, and her mother is like an evil sorceress, I guess. And they live in a really weird house that has no doors, which I don't really know what that means, but she lives with her mom. She doesn't really have any friends, and they eventually have to move away from their village because something happens, and I think her mother panics, and they end up living in this manor house where this rich guy is, and the mother wants to like trick that guy into marrying her, and it's a whole thing, and sounds interesting. That doesn't ring a bell with any Brothers Grimm stories I've read though, so I don't know if I've actually read that story, but whatever this author writes, I'm gonna like. It does sound kind of weird and a little dark, which I'm definitely into, and it says on the back here that this is rife with secrets, murder, and forbidden magic, and I feel like we can't go wrong with that. Then we have more fantasy horror with The Deathless Girls by Kiran, Millwood, Hargrave. And this follows two twins, I think, and it says on the eve of their divining day, the day that they learn about their fates, they are kidnapped by this cruel guy, and they're taken away from the travelers community that they're a part of, and they are sent to work in the castle kitchens of this guy. I like this was recommended to me, and I'm pretty sure that that person mentioned something about like Dracula's brides, like this story is inspired by that. So I'm guessing maybe there are vampires in here? Who knows? But it sounds very intriguing, and apparently this is like super gothic and very dark, which I'm always a fan of. And I do think that this leans YA, so we'll see how that goes, but I am intrigued. I also really like this cover, and I'm really wondering why there is a polar bear on the cover. If that has anything to do with the story, or if it's just there because it's cute. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to find out. Next, we have more gothic fantasy horror vibes with a book that I have wanted since it came out earlier this year. It's An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson, which is set at a magic school, and what could be better than that? It follows a girl who gets into this school because she has this power of persuasion, so she can like control other people and persuade people, I guess, and maybe do even more than that. And it's kind of like an unsettling power, but she goes to the school to learn how to use it. And despite the studies being quite difficult and like using this magic seems to be quite taxing, she loves the school, she loves her classmates, and of course she loves her charismatic teacher, because there's always one of those. I think we follow her through her studies though, as she learns more about her power, but also as she learns more about the school, which I think has like a dark, scary history, which is always intriguing. And the reason that this really like made me want to read it is that I feel like it just has a lot of elements to it that I like in books. So I'm hoping this will be put together really well and that I'm really going to enjoy it. I love these kinds of fantasy books, so it'll be interesting to see what it's like. The chapters also have these like illustrations, which is cool. Then we have some witch books because, again, I am me. The first one is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cooke, and this is set on a remote Scottish island, which is obviously a great setting, and the story is about these two sisters who goes missing, and then 20 years later, one of them turns back up, but they're still the age that they were when they went missing, which is obviously weird. I think the person that we're following is the third sister of these two sisters, and she has spent the last 20 years trying to figure out what happened to them. And so she's obviously excited when this girl turns back up, even though she is the age that she was when she went missing, which is strange, and they don't really understand what's going on. And I think there's talk in like the village or something about the fact that she may be a wildling because there is this lighthouse and there's a cave beneath the lighthouse where witches were kept at a certain time and they were kept there to be put to death. And apparently these witches put a curse on the place. And it sounds like a great setup for a book, so I'm very intrigued. This is also fantasy, so I am assuming there is actually something really weird going on. The second witch book I have is one that's always mentioned every single time I talk about witch books, and someone will be like, oh my god, haven't you read that book? You are gonna love it. So I finally just got it. It's The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, which is the same author that wrote An Academy for Liars. So I got two books by this author without ever having read any of this author's work. So hopefully I'm gonna like both of these. They sound really good, both of them, so I'm sure I will. This is historical fiction fantasy set in a place where it says that the prophet's word is law, so I'm assuming it's a really religious place. And apparently our main character, like her very existence, is blasphemous because her mother had her with an outsider and that cast her whole family into disgrace. And so our main character is just trying to survive, and she keeps her head down and she's trying to just follow the law and be really submissive, which it kind of seems like all the women in this place have to be. Then though, something happens where our main character is lured into the forest, like the forbidden forest around the settlement, and in this forest, I guess the prophet once chased down and killed these four witches, and their spirits are still in the forest. And these spirits decide to give our main character this gift, which is the journal of her dead mother. And this changes her whole life, and I don't really know what's gonna happen with that, but I'm assuming this, like, maybe the prophet isn't what he says he is. The forest is also called Darkwood, which is really cool. And I'm just taking all of your word for the fact that I'm gonna like this. Hopefully I will. I usually do really like witch books, so I get the recommendation. Moving on, we have some short stories because I would really like to get back into reading them because it's been a while. With short stories though, it's always really difficult to explain what they're about until you've read them. So I got 3 of these and I'm gonna try to go through them quite quickly because, to be honest, I don't really know what these are about. Only like, it's very surface level, my knowledge of these. First up, I got Spirits Abroad by Zen Cho, and this seems to have some fantasy elements to it, some magical realism, I don't really know. It says that it straddles the worlds between the mundane and the magical, or something like that. I don't really know what that means, but it also says that this has like a distinct Malaysian sensibility to it, like all of the stories. I don't know what that means either, but it'll be interesting to find out. It does mention on the back here enchanted realms, vampires, and incorrigible grandmothers. So, yeah. I've never read anything by this author. I just thought it looked and sounded interesting, so I got it. The second one I have is one that I mentioned in a recent TBR actually. It's The Haunting Season, Ghostly Tales for Long Winter Nights. And when I mentioned this, a lot of you said that you would really enjoy this book, so that makes me even more excited to read this. It is an anthology, so it has loads of different authors, and all of these stories are kind of like spooky and a little dark, and I'm assuming there are some ghosts, and it's obviously perfect for the winter season, so I'm very excited to read this. I'm gonna read this, I think, when it starts to snow here, It has snowed, but then it's rained away. So I'm hoping it's gonna snow soon and I can cuddle up on the couch and read this. The last one that I have is Buried Deep by Naomi Novik, which I kind of just got because I have read 1 or 2 books by this author and I really like them, so I'm just assuming I will like her short stories. I'm not sure what the stories are about, but they are fantasy, and it mentions on the back here a mushroom witch, which sounds great. That's what I want to be. Elizabeth Bennet captaining a long-winged dragon. I don't know what that means, but I do like dragons. I don't know what this is going to be like, but I'm going to try it and we'll see what I think. Lastly, we have a historical fiction section, starting with The Toll House by Carly Reagon. And this does have some horror elements to it, I think, and maybe some fantasy, supernatural stuff in it. I'm not quite sure. It follows a woman who moves into this house at the edge of town with her son, and the estate agent does tell them that like the house has a lot of history to it, but that could mean a lot of things. And so they move in, and I'm guessing they think everything is going to be fine. And then this mother finds a death mask in one of the walls or something, and that seems to trigger something, and things get kind of scary and a little dark. I'm guessing this is sort of like a haunted house story. I'm not quite sure what to expect, but I thought it sounded interesting. And I hope it's not too spooky for me. Sometimes things get a little bit too scary for me, but it says mostly that this is like a chilling thriller. So we'll see what this is like. The setup sounds really intriguing though. Then we have The Weaver and the Witch Queen by Genevieve Gornichec. So another witch book, and this one is set in Norway actually, in the 10th century. It follows 2 women, one of which I think is trying to save her sister who has been kidnapped by the Vikings, and the other is a witch who lives in the far north who is destined to become the Queen of Norway. It's always cool to read books set in Norway since I live here and this is where I'm from, so I'm excited to see what this is like. And I can't remember if I've read any fiction books set in like the Viking Age, maybe in like school when we learned about it, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I would say that my knowledge of the Viking Age is pretty standard. I don't really know a lot about it, so I don't know if this is going to be historically accurate or not. I also don't know if I really care because it's a fiction book, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I am especially interested in this witch from the far north. I'm excited to meet her. She sounds interesting. Then we have a book set in 1920s London. It's A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons by Kate Khavari. And this follows this woman who I think is a research assistant, and she's trying to be like a trailblazer at her university, which is really difficult in part because the people who work there don't believe that women have the same abilities as men, and in part because there's something about the reputation of her dead father, I think, which I guess isn't great. This is a mystery though, and I think the mystery, like something happens when our main character is at a dinner party, and I think the professor's wife, like one of the wives of the professors, drops dead and she's been poisoned, and everyone thinks that her husband did it, but that guy is our main character's mentor, so she's trying to like figure out what actually happened because she doesn't believe it's him. I think when she investigates things, the murderer does come after her, which is a little scary. For this one, I'm just sort of expecting something a little bit lighter and not like super serious. I'm getting that sort of vibe from it. It's also quite short. It's only like 250 pages. And I hope it's gonna be like light and fun for whenever I need that. Second to last, we have this book, which is Yours from the Tower by Sally Nicholls. And the first thing I have to mention about this is the sprayed edges. It's pretty rare that I get a book with sprayed edges, but this is really cool. Now, this is an epistolary novel following 3 female characters who I think met at boarding school, and when they leave, they end up like living very different lives. One teaches at an orphanage, one is looking for a rich husband in London, and one is, I think she's stuck being the unpaid companion of like a family member or something. And The book is just about their letters to each other, and they are sharing their hopes and frustrations and some romances with each other, and I just thought that sounded really good. I love epistolary novels, which is kind of why I wanted to get this, but I've never heard anyone talk about this book, so I'm going into it kind of blind. Then we have another beautiful book. It's The Specimens by Mary Kidd, and this is set in early 1800s Edinburgh, and I love books with that setting, and I just can't get enough of them. So whenever I see one, I kind of just get it. The story follows two women, one poor and one wealthy, I think, who get caught up somehow in like body snatching and murders, and there's like a serial killer, and I don't really know what's going on. But I love books set in Edinburgh in this time period, so I just wanted to try it out. I did also fall for this cover a little bit, but yeah, I love these kinds of historical fiction novels, and I do think that it's inspired maybe by true events. I'm not sure, but I'm excited to read it. That was the last book in my stack though, which means that we have reached the end of this video. Now, I would love to know if you have gotten any exciting new books lately. Tell me all about it in the comments. And also, if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, I would love to hear what you thought. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!